All things take time, don't they? And that's what I want to share with you today about what has happened since I started my urban homestead venture in August last year. So we're coming up, we are about to enter July almost. So I'm 2 months and a bit short of a 12-month rotation, or a 12-month 1 year anniversary for the homestead, starting from scratch, starting from a big weedy mess, and where I am today. And there's been so much to learn. So I want to share with you all the things that I've learned, or the biggest things that I've learned, and where I'm at right now as we enter winter. So welcome to winter with the Urban Homestead Artist. My name's Kayleen. And the first thing you may notice, or you may not, is my video. My video is probably looking not so clear. That is due to a few tech issues. So I've had all sorts of navigation in that regard. And being new at a lot of this, it's been difficult to put together videos in a way I would like to put them. And, I've done my best and I'm growing and learning, but that's part of the journey too. So I've been growing in that area. I have yet to work out how to overlay. When you're talking and then you have the picture that you can overlay, and you can still hear me talking in the background without me doing a voiceover. So I have been working with my phone mainly and using an app on my phone that I can do most things on, and then it started to play up. So there's been a bit of a gap in my videos because of that reason. I have got so much footage, but I couldn't put it together because it started to play up. So I'm re-navigating that. So today it's winter and it's cold and it's very windy out there, and there's just no filming happening today for those reasons plus some. I am recovering from a head cold. I don't particularly want to be out there in the weather. But I did want to catch up with you guys and tell you about the journey and go back over that. So from August, or start of August, I started planting seeds at the very, very end, the last days of July last year. So we're in the end of June now, 2022, which is winter for us in Melbourne. I started at the end of, coming out of the end of winter last year, as we're starting to plant up, ready for spring. So I've done a spring and a summer, and I've entered the autumn and the winter and done the winter plantings. Now, my biggest fail, I would say, to date is I planted a lot of seedlings, and in winter, the two things that I noticed I struggled with the most was I had seedlings growing, and when the weather started to turn cold, less appealing to be outside, different season too for me, and so it was harder to get into the garden, but it was so easy to neglect the little baby seedlings that were undercover, like in the greenhouse and that. I don't have an automated system where I have to hand water everything pretty much in my garden, so that's something that's not set up yet. So I do have to tend to my garden's water needs manually and keep tabs on that. That is really difficult in the colder weather. When it's raining, then it's not raining, but it's cold, and you don't notice it's not raining because it's so cold. And so I did lose some of my seedlings, but a lot of them grew on. And then there were seedlings that really desperately needed to go into the ground that I wasn't sure where to put, that I could protect them, because I had a lot of brassicas and I was worried about cabbage moth, further down the track. And I'm thinking, where can I put them that I can easily net, that's not going to be amongst other things that might be a bit tricky. In the end, what I did is, I thought, I just got to get them in. If I don't get them in, I'm not going to have anything anyhow. So I started to put some in. Some are still in my little greenhouse, getting long and leggy. And some are not too bad, they could go in now because I haven't fed them, and so they're not huge. But the worst thing that happened with the colder months, with the winter crops, is I put a lot in, and I was very good putting a lot in initially, and I mulched around them, just a little bit of mulch around them, and it was like a magnet to the birds, to things like blackbirds and the Indian miners and that, and they just came in and annihilated them. They just came in and dug them over because the mulch was like attractive for them to come and look for bugs. So they dug it all out. I might as well have had chooks in my garden. So I lost pretty much, I don't know, most of them, all the little seedlings that I had raised for my winter season. So I don't have a lot in, and right now I do need to get out there and do something about the slugs and the snails that are starting to get really active, and I do need to feed them. I need some, I'm just going to put some chicken poo pellets around and feed them quickly. That's what I need to do. So the feeding slowed up as well. So because of me, I have neglected the winter garden. I think initially I got discouraged when the birds just ruined everything that I had been growing for weeks, and I got a bit discouraged and a bit run down, and the weeds. Can I tell you, the weeds have been my biggest problem. The weeds were a problem when I started the garden in August. I had a yard, and we're talking about an urban homestead here. I had a yard totally overrun by every horrible weed. What's the word? Weeds that are just hard to get out, hard to control. I had them all, and we had oxalis everywhere, and all the couch grass, all the grasses that just are really hard to keep out of your garden. So I wanted to do the no-dig method. I wanted to do organic. I did, cardboard and mulch and as much as I could afford at the time. So there was a lot of areas that weren't done, and I went big quickly. So I planted a lot and built a lot of gardens quickly. And I think looking in hindsight, I'm glad I did, because it did give us a lot of food over the spring, summer time and into autumn. And it taught me a lot about what is going to grow really easily and well in my garden, or in certain spots in my garden, in my yard, and what doesn't. So it was a bit of a scattergun approach, but I got a really good idea of what works. But in the same respect, I also had I'd thrown a lot on my plate. And so there was a lot for me to keep up with, because I'm the solo gardener here. My husband has helped, built the chook pen and, he's helped with a few jobs, but basically it's totally my responsibility, and all of the work does fall back on me, and I have other things that I do as well. So it was hard to manage, and, we have both dreamed of having more land. We both originally, years ago, we both had land before we met each other. We were both, loved having acreage and had acreage, and now we don't. We have a fairly decent sized block, but not huge. So I think we have about 850-ish square metres of land, and then we've got a fairly decent sized house on it, so there's not a lot of growing space. So in saying that, when I first started doing, I thought, oh gee, I really would love to have acreage. You can't do much with a small bit of land, but to be honest with you, we've cut our grocery bill right down and had a fair amount of produce out of my fumbling project. Like, I'm starting from scratch, testing, pushing boundaries, testing the waters with so many things, growing things I've never grown before, and like I said, a scattergun approach, and yet out of it it's been incredibly worthwhile. However, the grasses and the weeds have just, they're winning. you know they're winning at the moment. So I've got beds that I'm having to reweed up and redo and that, but I haven't worried too much in the autumn time because we do get the rain and it has cooled off, so the ground is soft. Where I have thrown down mulch and we've got weeds creeping across to it and across it, and trying to root in it, those areas are so lovely and worm-filled and beautiful now because of everything that I did put on it, that the weeds come up pretty easy. They're not like hard to get up, so not impossible to get up. So that is the good thing. What I have to do is to make sure that I get to all of that before it does get warm again and things dry up and it gets hard. It's just too overrun. So this is not all my gardens, but we do, and oxalis just keeps coming up. Now with the oxalis, apart from the fact it's edible, it's all edible. We don't indulge in masses of oxalis. So the chooks get a little bit of it, and the mulch, I use it as a green manure, and it comes out, like the top part comes out with a long root part on it very, very easily. So the new growth that's coming out is coming out easily. I don't know if the bulb things are still underneath the ground, but I do know that if you keep pulling these things up, it eventually exhausts the plant. So when it's looking nice and lush before it gets to flowers or before it gets to seed, I'm pulling it up as I go and just doing a bit here and there and trying to get on top of it. But it does make nice green manure. I was told that, and maybe some of you people know the answer to this, but I was told that if your ground is deficient in calcium, they thrive. So the cure is actually to make sure you've got more calcium in your soil. So I'm going to look at adding calcium to my soil. So the weeds have been the biggest issue. So if I was to do it all over again, I think I'd still plant all those things and see, because I got to know, what seeds didn't grow well at the time I planted them, what grew well. I did use a heat mat, so I had a high strike rate, like a high germination rate in most of the things that I grew. I learnt a lot about growing little seedlings and sprouting those seeds. In all the methods that I have done, I have defaulted a little bit to, when I start seeds, to start them in damp napkins inside a plastic container, putting them on the heat mat or near a heat mat, letting them sprout, watching them every day, especially after about day 3, starting to watch them, and as they sprout, plant them into cell trays. So this way you're not wasting your time on, ones that just aren't going to sprout. You can see that they've sprouted, that they're fertile, and off you go. So that I have found to be worthwhile approach to starting the seeds. I've also found it highly worthwhile composting. Now I've had a compost bin. I kind of cold compost. I don't turn compost. I don't have the time or the energy to turn compost. So we kind of do have a big, 1 metre by 1 metre bay that we add to. However, I find the high values in our worm farm. If you have a little worm farm and keep turning that over, like keep feeding your worms and harvesting the castings, and that is just beautiful for the garden. And the worms are great, so that has been really good. And in that journey, I've started to think about, how do I do things easier and quicker and be more efficient, because it is just me doing this. How can I grow things in a way that it kind of combines all the elements and makes it just a little bit easier, or takes some steps out? So I've composted in place a bit. I've added compost and kitchen scraps and castings and all the rest of it in place in certain situations, which I'll talk about. I'll dedicate a video to that, because it's really quite easy, but a very good idea, and it's helpful for even people that don't have even a backyard. That's a way that they can have compost without having a compost bin, so to speak. So I've been composting in place in pots in the garden and in the ground, and our chooks are well on their way. So we built a amazing pen, a house for them, or my husband did. I kind of told him what I wanted, and after a little bit of a wrestle, I got what I wanted. And I wanted one that was, again, going to be low maintenance as possible, because I thought if I end up having to do that, because he was like, this is my thing, I'll take care of them, I'll do it. But I knew from past experience that, things can change. So I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be really hard on me to look after that, and to me, digging out pens and things like that. So I had him build it in a way that was easy on me. And I'm just going to pause for a bit. I'm going to sneeze. Okay, I'm back under my heat bags. So I was saying about the chicken pen. So we made it in a way that was easy to, clean it out and look after the chooks. And that has been really good. It was a good design. It was kind of taken a little bit from something I had seen online, and I adjusted it for us and our situation and the position it was in our yard. And so I don't have roosters. I want to be friendly with my neighbours, so I don't have roosters, but we have quite a few hens now, and we've just introduced some younger ones in. We have Isa Browns, which are great layers, and good size eggs, and they're really good layers. We introduced another 4 this week, and that was interesting. So again, I'll share that another time, but more on the chooks. So we have now a dozen chickens. We free range them when we can. They do have a big pen, and they get a lot of fresh food. In addition to the pellets, they're a good pellet that they have no hormones or rubbish in them. So they get fed really well, and they get lots of attention and pats. And we love them. We just love the chooks. We just love them. So it's more enjoyable. The weather's nice to sit out there with a cuppa and watch the chickens, but it's still lovely to have them. I tested some areas in the yard that would be classical no-nos, places you just wouldn't try and grow vegetables, places most gardeners would tell you don't even bother trying, because I really, like I said with the scattergun approach, I really wanted to push the boundaries and see what would grow where and what was just a waste of time, and what was not a waste of time. And I did find that there was areas that I really didn't think I would be able to grow anything, but feeding the soil was the difference maker. Where I thought sun would be a problem, things still grew. Where I thought sun would be a problem, I grew tomatoes successfully. So I have tried to improve the sun situations in some areas, including we pulled out a creeper off our back veranda that we had a jasmine on it although I am growing something up it as well now. But it just was like this wall that blocked off a bit of sun to the area that I was growing the tomatoes in, but they still grew. So I was quite surprised where I had vegetables that were supposed to need full sun that didn't get it, but still gave us a lot of food. So I grew quite a few different tomatoes. I stuck to a lot of heirloom varieties, mainly heirloom varieties of everything. I tried some old seeds that I had to see if old seeds would work. Most didn't, but I managed to grow spaghetti squash successfully out of seeds from 2016. So I tried kitchen scraps and successfully am growing some kitchen scraps. Onion. I grew just to try. I put an onion scrap, the end of an onion, in the ground, and it started to grow, and then I'd forgotten about it. I thought, I've killed that. Like, that's just long gone. Then I was digging around in that spot for something and pulled out a whole red onion. So that worked. And I've got a video on the channel of some pineapple tops that I started and how I started that and planted them. They're going fine. They're in my greenhouse, in my hothouse, and they're happy still. They're growing very happily, and I don't have any pineapples yet. They take a little bit to get a pineapple on it, but it looks like they're going to work. So, it pays to try different things in your yard or on your land and in your situation to see what works, because, people say that you can only do things a certain way, but sometimes that's not necessarily true, and sometimes something works wonderfully for someone else and it won't work for you. So I think gardening for me, in a nutshell, has been observation. Trying, experimenting, taking the risk, observing what happens, and then making note of what works well and rinse and repeat. So that's what I'm going to be doing as I move into the spring. I will be, there's things that I will plant earlier or later because I saw the result of that. There's things I will plant less of and things that I'll plant more of. And I am expecting a lot more food for us in that my second spring-summer season. I got all the equipment together to do canning and that. I've done a little bit in my past, but a long time ago, but I set that all up again and started to get into canning and that, and found with the canning and preserving, one of the biggest advantages of that, apart from preserving backup supplies or, just having a little bit there as a buffer in case, you've got to stay indoors or whatever. Food prep, meal prep became a lot easier. I started to see the options of meal prep. So, for example, I did spaghetti bolognese. So I canned this. I'm talking pressure canned spaghetti bolognese, and it was amazing, and it was so quick. And there was a situation where I went, I really wish I had that cooked, and it was. All I had to do is chip it out, and threw it on top of some vegetables or something, and then away I went. So that the canning can be used for food prep, which is very helpful, time saving. In the throes of doing the homestead thing, and changes of season for me, I found I saw my surrounds with a different view. When your seasons change, I think you need to assess what you own, the stuff you've got, and even where things are in your house. You might have always had things in one spot because in that season you were having to put your hand on that every day. And now that's irrelevant even. So it needs to either go or it needs to go further away from that workstation or wherever you are, so to make your life easier. So I was doing a reassessment on everything when I started this. I was reassessing, food and provision and finances and the quality and health of our food, soil, so many things to do with growing, permaculture, carbon farming, you name it. I was like looking into all of that and learning so much about that, and also the homesteading side. What do I cook now? What's healthy for us now? What kind of foods? And I have also discovered that a no sugar and no flour, pretty much no flour, but definitely no sugar diet is really important for me personally. So I try and cook that way. I was going really great, and then I had a moment of weakness, and it kind of spiraled backwards. So I'm just trying to get back on that now. But in saying that, when you think about no sugar, like if you're someone who's trying to reduce sugar or eliminate sugars, I'm talking about all sugars, everything that's sugary from your diet, that changes the way you look at things like preserves, like jams and cakes and breads and all those sort of things. If I'm doing no sugar, no flour, that changed the way I had to look at those too. But there was still, all those things are still possible. I just had to find alternatives and adjustments and that. So it's, this whole thing has been a journey of change, adjusting to change, assessing and evaluating or re-evaluating change, and appreciating what works and being okay to let go of what doesn't work, because we can't do it all and we only have one life. So it's really important to not know what you're doing, but know what you want to be doing. Know where your most important whys are, and know why you're doing what you're doing. And then you can kind of really hone down on, okay, well, what does that need to include and what really doesn't need to include. So that's pretty much a brief on the homesteading journey for me for 2.5 months short of a year. My winter garden is producing. Don't get me wrong. The birds didn't take everything. Some things got going before they got into it. And I do have some produce, and we pick a bit, especially snow peas. We get snow peas regularly out of the garden. We have sorrel. We pick little alpine strawberries, or my grandson gets most of them. I discovered the daikon radish greens are quite yummy. They're almost like lettuce. I've got lettuce growing, and I've got corn salad, and what else have I got? I've got rhubarb. Although the rhubarb is slowing up for winter, we've had rhubarb. I mean, rhubarb here grows pretty much all the time, just about. There's not much of a gap with rhubarb. There's always more rhubarb than you need in the garden, even with a few plants, a couple of plants. What else have we got? I cut our lemon tree back really, really hard because we had gull wasp, and the neighbours have got it, and it's a bit hard to actually defeat it whenever everyone in the neighbourhood's got it. But I did cut it right back and take it all out of my tree, and the tree looked pretty bad when I did it. We rescued an overflowing wheelbarrow of lemons, which I preserved so it would last a long, long time. And I've got plenty of lemon juice to last us over, and we've got flowers on it now, so it looks like it's okay. So we will still have lemons so soon. And what else have I got growing? I don't think there's a lot. We've got some radishes, which I'm not keen on radishes. We've got a few beetroots, which we picked the leaves from as well to use the beetroot leaves. I think, and we've got spring onions, which I use the greens of it and just let it keep growing. And I think that's it. There's a bit of garlic greens I could use if I wanted to now, and we've got a few herbs. So that's kind of, there's a little bit of young silver beet in the garden, or perpetual spinach. And I think that's it, I think. But there's other stuff coming up, like there's young stuff coming up that we've got growing, carrots and there's other stuff coming up, but it won't be as much as it had been had I had those birds do what they did. So that is where we're at. I've also got big areas of my yard that I threw down mulch ages ago to get rid of the grass, and I just have that sitting there, and let the ground worms come up and just start working that ground. So when I was ready to plant in it, I could. It is a side part on our property where it was completely overshadowed by an ornamental pear. And the ornamental pear is absolutely glorious when it's in blossom for that very short time. It's just beautiful. But it's so big now, it just completely covers and fills in that space, and it was even rubbing on buildings around it, the fence and everything. So we've gone really hard and cut that back almost to a standard, like, just cut it right back, willing to risk, if we killed it, for the edible garden that we could have in there. So we've done that. I'm quite aware that a big tree will suck out of moisture and goodness out of the ground with all that we're growing. We want to grow around it, but you can still do it. You can still do it. So I do have some things started in that area, and now that's all cut back, and we had to have a fence replaced. So now, workmen have been and gone. That area is safe to plant into. And it has been sitting for months like that, not mulching down, lovely. I've got that big area that I can move into at any time. So it's good to have those areas down, like started, even if you're not ready for them, and getting rid of the weeds. Just getting rid of the weeds. Because with some of my other gardens, I did that and then planted into them, and then the kind of weeds popped up near them and then it's a matter of me having to keep pulling the weeds out in between it. Whereas if I had really blanketed that area and let it sit on it and then blanketed it again or something with mulch and cardboard, I probably could have got on top of it and then planted in. But the situation I was in last year, I really felt it's so important to get some food happening. I didn't have time. I didn't feel I had time to wait. So there was no waiting to do that. But in saying that, I have that other area that I have done that, and it's just sitting there. And so that will be, who knows what I'll be able to grow in there and produce for us, and see what comes out of there. And that will be available for some spring, summer planting, but the shade will still be there. If that tree, I'm pretty sure the tree will bounce back, it just won't take up that whole amount. And then I'll be able to still plant stuff that doesn't mind a bit of shade. Your green vegetables, your green leafy vegetables pretty much don't mind a bit of shade. They'll still grow. So in fact, some of them prefer it. So I'm still going to use it for all that. So yeah, so that's it. I have managed to keep it pretty organic. Well, I have managed to keep it organic, and I've had lots of different infestations, aphids and different infestations, but I have never seen so many pollinators and predatory insects move into my yard. I have everything in there, ladybirds, all different ladybirds, the hoverflies, just wasps, the good wasps, just everything. Everything's in there. So it's a very short time with one person kind of doing it on the cheap and making do with what I have, mostly from seed, doing it organically, and you can do it too. It's I'm no expert, and I've just gone in there and just been like a sponge and tried to learn as much as I can, test as much as I can, be brave, and try to be as diligent as I can when I have the time. Do everything I could while I could, and it has paid off, even if I've got to get out there with those weeds. And before I close, with those weeds and that, and any jobs, in any projects you're doing, regardless if it's the garden or anything on the homestead, if you just take chunks of time, if something's running away from you and you're going, like, that is just getting way beyond, like, we're just not getting to that. If you can't let it go, if it can't just, let's just not be doing that at the moment. If you still want to be doing that, just go out there for 15 minutes. Just say, I'm going to do 10 minutes a day or 15 minutes a day. And in saying that, that's what I'm telling myself this week. That's what I need to do. I need to go out in the garden when it's not raining, and just do 10, 15 minutes, and they'll all add up. If I did that 10, 15 minutes a day, at the end of the week, I would have at least an hour of gardening done every single week. And an hour of weeding, that's a lot of weeds. So that's my journey so far, just in a nutshell. There's so much more, but I tried to break it down so you could kind of get a visual, not a visual, but a verbal picture of how I've come from having absolutely nothing happening in my garden or in my kitchen, and in my home, to that. And I've been working on my home at the same time, particularly in the colder days, and decluttering and just simplifying in here, like simplifying. So yeah, I'll share more on that later too, because that has been amazing. So if you've got any questions, please remember, I'm here. Ask, and it will give me more things to chat to you about. And if this was helpful for you in any way, shape or form, you know the drill. Share, like, subscribe, do the little bell thing, you name it. Okay, I'll see you next time.